Hello again, everyone, and thanks for joining us for Monday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Dave Percy. On the hazardous weather graphic here, we've got winter weather advisories out for the lower Yukon River Valley and the Yukon Delta, up the eastern Norton Sound coastline and southern coast of the Seward Peninsula, Golovin to Nome, and then on up toward Teller in Wales. That's out for tonight and into tomorrow, actually through Wednesday. And that's for occasionally winds will gust to 50 miles an hour. Several storms will be rolling into the Bering Sea. Could see 4 to 6 inches of snow, possibly in some areas, along with intermixed with freezing rain, which will result in glaze ice. So pretty kind of a stormy pattern remaining in effect out that way. And then there's a winter storm watch out for the shaded areas of the southeast coast. And that's for tomorrow afternoon through Wednesday for 8 to 12 inches of snow possibly falling across these shaded areas. And outer coastline, though, will be trending toward rain. And that's just a possibility at this point with it being a watch as opposed to a warning. On satellite imagery, had some snow move through the southeast coast today. That's already starting to pull off to the east. Several inches in some areas associated with that, clearing back to the west and northwest. And clouds with low pressure up along the eastern Arctic coast kicked the winds up to about 40 to 50 miles an hour in some locations up there. That resulted in some blowing snow and reduced visibilities, but that'll be improving as it continues to move off into Canada. Generally fair and dry back to the south and southwest. And then out in the Bering Sea, you can vividly see this storm system here that's moving up just west of the Pribilof Islands, that usual spiral pattern to the cloud shape here. And the low center is actually right about there. That brought 60-mile-an-hour wind gusts to St. George today with that low center. Also, Akun Island had winds gusting to 60 miles per hour. And then along the front, Cape Newnham had winds gusting to 55 miles an hour with pretty gusty winds here across the southwest interior into Bristol Bay. And as far as rainfall goes, Cape Newnham had the heaviest amount, 0.8 of an inch. False Pass had about 0.4 of an inch. So not a real big precipitation producer, but that spreading snow northward there. And that'll be moving in again to the St. Lawrence Island area overnight tonight. On the chart, there's that low center just west of the Pribilofs, 975 millibars, and of course a tight pressure field with that, bringing the winds back up there across the Pribilofs today with the main low center after they dropped off when the main front went through, but that picked up along the coast, rain, Kodiak Island, across King Salmon, Bristol Bay, and getting to be a rain mix condition there at Bethel, and then whatever's already into the Yukon Delta in the form of snow, trough swinging westward in the south side of that low center, spreading gusty winds and precipitation in the form of mixed rain or snow, or just rain, or maybe just snow. But whatever falls will be a pretty wet, sloppy mess. There's a light snow up along the eastern Arctic coast. Weak high pressure following that in behind. Still some isolated snow showers here over the extreme eastern interior. Ended over the Copper River Basin. And this batch of moisture here associated with a weak system right through there, that's going to be taken off to the southeast and will be out of the area probably this evening as the clearing skies move in. And for tomorrow, you'll see a pretty good day there for the Panhandle, light winds and mostly sunny skies with temperatures starting to edge upward a little bit there, but still on the chilly side. And that dry pattern right up across Copper River Basin, upper Tanana, 40-mile country, through the Kobuk-Koyukuk valleys, right out to the western Arctic coast, and the Noatak Valley there. As this front pushes northeastward, weakens somewhat, definitely loses the wind it's got associated with it, but a batch of moisture will follow it in, and mixed precipitation south central Alaska, rain southern Kenai Peninsula, on up into Prince William Sound, and then snow, narrow band of light snow on the northern side of that front. And then possible freezing rain with this push of warm air up across the Yukon Delta. and possibly maybe into eastern Norton Sound. Otherwise, that trough here, southeast of the low center, again, gusty winds, maybe to 40 miles an hour for the Pribilofs, rain and snow with that, scattering out to just some showers there for the Fox Islands. And then the next system coming onto the chart there with more rain and snow mixed, and an increase in the winds. For tomorrow, this low center pulls northward there, and so look for snow and blowing snow here across the Yukon Delta, as I mentioned, up into the southern Seward Peninsula, back to St. Lawrence Island, and warm temperatures behind the warm front, of course, mixed rain and snow. That's a pretty narrow band there, and there'll be rain from Nunivak Island and the Kuskokwim Bay area back along the front that'll extend down into the eastern Aleutian areas as it exits the AKwx location. But low pressure back there to the west, that keeps it pretty breezy and unsettled, at least through tomorrow and probably into tomorrow night. Here's the moisture that's sliding into the southeast coast, and for tomorrow afternoon, that's when those advisories kick in, and that will continue through Wednesday. Got low center moving northward here toward Kodiak Island, brings a chance of rain to the south coast in the afternoon. But it looks like this first low will dissipate and slide off to the southeast. This will come up and then over the top of this ridge down to the south, and I'll move into the Panhandle. Otherwise dry up here, Brooks Range on out to the Arctic coast, with kind of a snowy day for the Copper River Basin, scattered showers in the central interior. And then we'll see that on Wednesday, that low center does track eastward here, and all the moisture into the Panhandle now. Look for mixed rain and snow, getting kind of showery and tapering off in the afternoon down Prince of Wales Island, and still mostly in the form of snow, higher elevations and over toward the eastern border. Otherwise dry here for the Copper River Basin from the Tanana Valley, actually. Maybe some snow showers along the White Mountains, but dry to the north there. Mostly clear for the eastern Beaufort Sea and North Slope areas. Dry south central Alaska with varying amounts of cloudiness. Less of that as you head over toward Valdez, Cordova area. And then another frontal boundary with a low driving northward toward the Russian Far East. Couple of lows farther back to the west, so that means south to north flow continued right across the Bering Sea, which will help push that ice edge back to the north. And then rain here, Kuskokwim Delta, Bristol Bay, all the way down across the Fox Islands. Gusty winds, maybe 35 to 45 miles an hour with this, some cases even 50 miles an hour. Snow and blowing snow, Seward Peninsula and the northwest interior, and definitely the northwest coast, all the way up to Point Lay. Drier conditions back to the west. Or east, off to the east. And for lows tonight, anywhere from 5 to 20 below over the east side and northeast, and a little bit milder, but still below zero for the Arctic coast. Upper 20s, lower 30s here over the southwest, and mid 30s, Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak, 20s, south central Alaska, and teens to upper 20s for the Panhandle. And your highs for tomorrow afternoon, edging up above zero there over at Eagle, a ways, 11 degrees up. Still a couple of areas holding below zero and single numbers in the Arctic coast, and mid-20s to mid-30s for your highs in the southeast, and upper 30s for the Pribilofs, and we see a lot of lower 40s here for the Aleutians, right on up into Kodiak and Bristol Bay, 30s all the way up to the Seward Peninsula. And then your lows for Wednesday morning, chilling back off here up to the northeast, back down to 20 or 15 to 25 below, upper Yukon Valley into the North Slope, and a little below zero for the Arctic coast. Got mid-20s Kuskokwim Valley to near 30 out to the southwest, and mid-30s there for the Alaska or for the Aleutians, and for the southeast coast, your lows mid-20s to mid-30s, followed by highs that will be approaching 40 along the coast. Otherwise, into the 30s here, staying near or below freezing in the north, a little below zero in the northeast. Mid to upper 30s here in the west, quite mild conditions all the way up. Notice that Shishmaref, forecast high of 38 degrees.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Taking a look at the first flying weather graphic. Lots of IFR, northern Bering Sea, in across the Yukon Delta, all the way up to the southern Seward Peninsula, and then kind of east-southeast here, right into the the Kuskokwim Valley, over the Alaska Range. Mostly marginal, though, for Cook Inlet on up to the Matanuska Valley, back into IFR, Kenai Peninsula, and along the North Gulf Coast there, but marginal VFR right along the coastline of the southeast coast. And then areas of VFR, marginal VFR, and IFR here over the northern eastern interior. And then that band with the next front pushing IFR way out there to the west. That kind of breaks apart for the afternoon. This part lifting north, another part shifts off to the east. And we're still through the central interior and south. See the lowest flying conditions better up around the Brooks Range on out to the Arctic coast, St. Lawrence Island, southern Seward Peninsula, stay IFR. IFR now into Lincoln Canal and Glacier Bay, and along the coast down to about Port Alexander, marginal VFR along the coast of Prince of Wales Island. And then for Wednesday morning, solid IFR in the forecast there for the southeast coast. In fact, pretty good IFR dominating the weather pattern here from the Brooks Range all the way down to the south to northern Bristol Bay and the Kenai Peninsula, Matanuska Valley, and back to the west here. And a little bit better out over the Bering Sea and the Aleutians, kind of a narrow band of VFR out there, but IFR for the Fox Islands. And for the afternoon, kind of shifts up to the northeast a little bit, improves somewhat over the interior, especially on the east side here, but still a lot of marginal or IFR conditions back to the west until it just is solid IFR from the Bering Strait all the way down to Togiak Bay and Dillingham. Areas of IFR, Alaska Peninsula to the Fox Islands, and IFR over the eastern panhandle. Anaktuvik tomorrow, good VFR, and same forecast for Adigan as well. Lake Clark and Merrill starting out IFR, improving throughout the day, possibly becoming VFR. And for Rainy, though, probably holding IFR most of the day. Windy, same thing, IFR the entire day. Isabel, IFR. Mentasta a little better, call it marginal. And Tanita, IFR, gradually becoming marginal in the afternoon. And for Portage, same trend, IFR trending toward marginal conditions. And for Chilkoot and White, VFR, and then rapidly dropping down to IFR throughout the afternoon. Freezing levels, 6,000 feet, way down to the south or to the southwest of the Panhandle. We got 2,000 to 4,000 feet over the Gulf of Alaska, Kodiak Island. And the surface now back in along the coast late tonight, right along the coastline of the southeast coast. And out in the Bering Sea, still a fair distance to the north here, well north of the Pribilofs, almost to St. Nunivak Island. And moving on to icing. Got areas of isolated moderate rime icing here, southwest interior, on up to the Bering Strait, St. Lawrence Island, about 5,000 feet. Another band, possible icing here along the Yukon River. And then above 4,000 out over the central Aleutians. And icing chances increase along the northern panhandle and the coast throughout the afternoon. Jet stream, we've got, well, pretty good ridging here across the northeast Pacific, right on up into the Arctic. So we've got southerly flow on the west side of that, about 90 knots, and the stronger jet well south of the western Aleutians. And we've got a 90 to 100 knot jet sailing southward here, right across the panhandle. 9,000 feet, showing southwest, 45 to 60 knots here over the central Aleutians, and then falling back to about 40 knots around the Seward Peninsula. Lighter 20 knot winds over the eastern interior, pretty light in the Arctic coast, and 20 to 30 knots here for the Panhandle, strongest down south. And at 3,000 feet, those are much lighter here at 3,000 than at 9, with 5 to 10 knots, 5 to 10 up across all the eastern interior to the eastern Arctic coast, and 10 to 15 Gulf of Alaska to Kodiak. But out here, good southwest flow of 45 to 50 knots across the east central Aleutians, 45 knots right up into eastern Norton Sound, clocking about 40 knots. Otherwise, farther to the north, pretty light. And for turbulence, with all those winds, that's where the moderate chop will be out here from the northwest coast southward, across the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, lower Yukon Valley to Togiak Bay, as well as the Alaska Peninsula and the Aleutians. And after the break, I'll be back with a look at the marine forecasts.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider, and joining us here today is Eric Stevens from the Geographic Information Network of Alaska at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, GINA for short. And Eric, you frequently come on the show to tell us about these really cool things that we're doing with satellites over Alaska and how we can use these really awesome tools. But I'm thinking all the while there has to be a mad scientist somewhere working on the next cool thing in the satellite laboratory. What is being developed today?
Right. Well, you know, when I was a kid growing up in the boonies in North Dakota there, on Sunday after church, the old people, like my parents and their parents, would gather and have coffee and talk. And I kind of eavesdropped on them a little bit. And the theme of a lot of these conversations seemed to be, well, isn't it amazing what they can do these days, someone would say.
Sure.
And I was thinking, well, I don't know, I was too young.
Right.
Well, now I'm old enough in the weather satellite business.
You can remember when.
The new generation of weather satellites, I'm starting to say, isn't it amazing what they can do these days? Because it's always improving.
Yes.
Maybe an analogy here is like television. Television started in black and white, then it went to color. Analog signal transitioned to digital here a number of years ago. Standard definition becomes high definition. Right. Well, weather satellites are changing too. First weather satellites went up around 1960, not that long ago. No. It's comparatively young science. And every time a new series of satellite is launched, we learn from the past, so the mad scientists decide, well, we could make the next satellite even better in such and such a respect.
Yes.
And now the United States is on the verge of launching, or in progress of launching, a series of new geostationary satellites that are better than ever before.
Okay.
Let's take a look at some of the previews of what these new satellites can do.
Peek inside the lab here, okay.
Yeah, and so we'll peek in, and here are some mad scientists and mad technicians dressed in bunny suits. This is, believe it or not, this is the business end of a weather satellite under construction in a clean room. You don't want a speck of dust on the lens of a weather satellite's camera. So this is done in a clean environment. They are building a geostationary satellite there.
Oh, cool.
This new generation of satellites, if you had to answer the question, why are these better? Why do we care?
Okay.
You could answer it with 3 words: faster, better, more. The new generation of satellites are faster than the older ones. The images are sharper, they're better, and there's more spectral channels. We'll talk about that.
Any one of these called Steve Austin sounds faster, better, stronger.
Yeah.
Something.
You know what though? These things cost more than $6 million.
Yeah, I'm sure.
They're pricey, but they are an essential tool for the Weather Service to fulfill its mission of protecting lives and property.
Exactly.
You got to have the tool to do the job, and it helps all of us when we get the accurate forecast, the warning in time, and this is the tool. Faster. On left here, we see what the old generation of satellites could scan in 5 minutes. On the right, that's what you get in 5 minutes, the whole planet, or at least one side of it. So it's faster. That means you can take more images over a given amount of time and make smoother movie loops out of that. Because animating movie loops really helps you highlight a feature that maybe you can't see as well in a single image.
Absolutely does, yep.
Let's zoom into a small piece of real estate like Texas.
Sure.
And we can see here a satellite that has a 1-minute movie loop visible light. You can see thunderstorms boiling there.
Yeah, look at that.
Yeah, the rippling of the top of the thunderstorm. This is a fun movie loop. We're going to be able to see things like this more and more often because of the new satellites being generated. Some things are only evident in animation. So that's faster. Well, what's better? We're able to now have sharper imagery than before. The Japanese have a satellite that uses the same imager that is on the new generation of satellites that America is launching too. An imager, that's just a word for camera. It's the camera on a weather satellite. We have something called the Advanced Baseline Imager.
Sounds important.
ABI. It's important enough, it has an acronym. Everything's an acronym. Well, an ABI-like instrument is here over the Western Pacific, and we can see this color image. This is what a human eye might see if you were riding on the satellite. But it's a little bit fuzzy. With new technology, you can post-process the image taken by the satellite to highlight and sharpen some of the features. So this image here of the Western Pacific then becomes this image. Thanks to the processing techniques, yes, this is the newest technology. So we've got a new satellite that can provide better data than ever before. And on the ground, we can process it better than before as well to really sharpen up the imagery and to give us a better view of the weather than ever before. So faster and better and More. What do we mean by more? Well, on the older generation of satellites, the imager, the camera, had 5 slices of the spectral pie, visible imagery, infrared imagery, something we can't see from the human eye. A lot of different slices of the pie. We're going from 5. The new imager has 16 slices. Each slice has its own relevance. Some are best for volcanic ash, for smoke, for dust, for telling the difference between smoke and dust, which can look similar under some infrared channels, but other ones bring out certain things. All of these 16 bands are important. In fact, some of the mad scientists, they didn't want 16, they wanted 24. There's always more you can do. But that'll be the next generation of satellites. So now we say, isn't it amazing what we can do these days? And you know what? It makes you think, well, what's the future going to be like too? It's so important to be able to know what's going on now in the weather. If you're going to forecast the future, you got to know where things are now. And satellites are the way to see that, especially in Alaska, where we don't have as many observations down on the ground. The satellites fill in the holes.
Yeah, really important stuff. And I love hearing about what we can see right now, but I love thinking about what is possible in the future. It's amazing stuff. And since you paid for it, it's a good time to learn about it. If you'd like, check out the website at www.goes-r.gov. And as I understand, it's a really easy website to use.
Oh yeah, a lot of good information about what these new satellites mean to Americans. And it's the Weather Service's mission to protect lives and property, and this is the tool how to do it.
Cool stuff, Eric. Thanks so much for sharing that with us today, and thank you for joining us right here in Alaska Weather Facts. We'll see you next time. And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back to today's sea ice analysis. Retreating northward with those southerly winds, persistent southerly winds that are going to continue for the next 4 or 5 days. So that's going to be the forecast here for the ice edge to continue to retreat and kind of compact its way back up to the north. On to coastal water forecast. South coast here, the Panhandle, southerlies 10 to 15 knots, seas 10 to 11 feet. Small craft advisories on the north coast, wind-wise, and seas 9 to 10 feet. North 20, Lynn Canal. Southeast 20, gusts 35, so gale force gusts in the forecast for Stevens Passage, and then light northwest breeze at 10 for Clarence Strait. Outlook for Wednesday, north winds 20 continue for northern Lynn Canal. Southeast 20 knots here for the central and southern inside waters. Southwest 15 on the south coast. Southwest 15 to 20 on the north coast. Seas up around 9 feet. And Cook Inlet all the way down to Kamishak Bay. West winds 10 knots, 2 to 3 foot seas. West winds 20 knots for the Barren Islands and the western North Gulf Coast. Small craft advisories here in the eastern North Gulf Coast. South 25, northeast 20, 4 foot seas for Prince William Sound. Outlook for Wednesday, northwest 10 for the Sound, and then 20 knots out of the northwest for the eastern North Gulf Coast. West 20 here back for the western zone, and southwest 20 for the Barren Islands. Kamishak Bay, lighter winds, southeast at 15, and northeast 10 for Cook Inlet. Bristol Bay, small craft advisory, south 25, seas 10 feet. Small craft advisories also for the Alaska Peninsula, southwesterlies, 25 to 30 knots, seas 15 to 18 feet. And 20 knot winds here from Castle Cape up to Sitkinak, turn westerly up the east side of Kodiak Island at 20 knots with 11 foot seas. And then on Wednesday, southwest 20 there on the east side, small craft advisory, Shelikof Strait. And from Sitkinak to Castle Cape, small craft advisory, south 25, south 35 for the peninsula here, and south winds at 30 knots for Bristol Bay. Fox Islands tomorrow, south winds 30 knots, seas 14 to 18 feet, and near gale force here for the central Aleutians, southerlies 30 to 35, and that begins to diminish a little bit and turn more southeasterly as you head west. And then for Wednesday, they'll swing around to the west and northwest, actually northwest 30 out here in the western zone, southwest gales here farther to the east, but west of Adak. And actually that southwest wind pattern extends all the way across Atka Island. Seas approaching 30 feet in some areas. Fox Island, small craft advisories mostly, except for that gale, south 40 knots south of Unalaska Island. And seas 20 to 24 feet here on the Pacific side. And the Bering Sea side, 11 to 13. And for the southwest coast, south of Nunivak Island, gale warnings flying tomorrow, south 35 knots and southwest 35 for the Pribilof. Seas up around 20 feet there, 30-knot winds, St. Matthew Island. And then south winds at 30 here north of Nunivak Island, go southeast for Norton Sound, St. Lawrence Island for good brisk wind advisories. And that holds through Wednesday, south to southeast, 30 knots, Norton Sound, St. Lawrence Island. And gales now all along the southwest coast, south 35 knots, drop it down to 25 for the Pribilofs, and nudge it back up to 30 knots for St. Matthew Island. Eastern Beaufort Seacoast tomorrow, much lighter winds, and out of the northeast here, 10 to 15, going east 15 on the central coast, but brisk wind advisories here in the western zone, and Cape Beaufort to Cape Thompson, east at 20. And then back into brisk wind advisories, pretty stiff east wind at 30 knots there for the Chukchi Sea. And then Wednesday, southeast 30 knots, Wales, all the way up to Cape Beaufort. Otherwise, east 20, central and west side, and east 15, all of the eastern coast. And for tonight, again, that system moving out, light snow tapering off, winds definitely coming down, dry here through the interior. That moisture moves out of the panhandle with clearing. This front rolls into south central Alaska, southern Alaska, across the Kuskokwim Valley, up into the Seward Peninsula and St. Lawrence Island. Winter weather advisories out there, including Yukon Delta, possible glaze ice, and then really scattering out in the showers. You head down toward Bristol Bay. Then tomorrow, we've got moisture sliding into the panhandle. Winter storm watches out for snow, 6 to 12 inches, maybe even a little more for tomorrow night into Wednesday. Kind of a snowy day for the Copper River Basin, drying out Kodiak to South Central.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.